Final big story this Saturday edition of Breakfast Extra. In the throes of the global COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, Nigeria, like many developing economies, faced a fiscal emergency. Oil prices had plummeted to record lows, government revenues were in free fall, and health infrastructure was severely under-resourced. In response, the Nigerian government turned to the International Monetary Fund for emergency support, securing a $3.4 billion loan under the Rapid Financing Instrument, the largest COVID-19 related facility approved for any African nation at the time. Now, the loan disbursed without the typical structural conditionalities was aimed at stabilizing Nigeria's balance of payments, supporting critical health interventions, and shielding vulnerable segments of the population from the socio-economic shocks of the pandemic. Now, fast forward to May 2025. 5 years later, and Nigeria has now officially repaid the entire $3.4 billion loan. The announcement confirmed by the federal government and the IMF was made with relatively little fanfare, but bears significant implications. While the repayment suggests a commitment to fiscal responsibility and international credit worthiness, critics argue it does little to address the country's mounting domestic debt burden, which now exceeds 97 trillion naira. Others question whether this is a real economic milestone or merely a symbolic gesture, especially when juxtaposed with ongoing domestic borrowing and underfunded public services. Notably, Nigeria continues to pay annual charges to the IMF on the special drawing rights that formed the basis of the loan, meaning the financial chapter isn't entirely closed.
Oh, good times. And so joining us today to dissect the economic, political, and ideological layers behind this repayment are a panel of thought leaders with diverse and hopefully, interesting perspective as well. First, we're joined by an economist and also a keen observer of Nigeria's political and fiscal dynamics. Is none other than Mr. Gbolahan Olojede. Also joining us is Bala Ibrahim. He's the Director of Publicity, National Director of Publicity for the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, who will offer insight into the political messaging around the loan repayment. Also joining us in our subsequently will be a Pan-Africanist and former spokesperson to the late Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, who's renowned for his outspoken critiques of Western economic influence in Africa. In fact, it was his video that has now sparked this conversation. Do we have key to play that video, guys?
We'll get that information.
All right, so let's cue that video for you. Take a look at that, and then we'll come back for this discussion.
Nigeria just finished paying back $3.4 billion loan to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Great, right? Nope. Let me break it down. We got the money during COVID, just like many other African and global South countries. Then came the conditions: remove fuel subsidies, devalue the national currency, open the economy for more foreign control. What followed? Hunger, protests, broken systems. Now they are clapping because the debt is paid off. But what about the social debt? The lives broken, the schools unfunded, the food unaffordable. The IMF is not here to help us. It's here to restructure us into obedience. Nigeria paid back the money, but the real cost was our sovereignty.
All right, so he's going to join us subsequently in this discussion, but let me start with you, Mr. Gbolahan Olojede. Does this repayment signal true economic recovery, or is this largely political optics, or is this Nigeria willing to the beatings or the conditions of the IMF?
We follow a course. So when you take a loan, there are the terms and conditions of that loan. One of the critical terms and conditions of every loan is the tenor. There is a repayment cycle for every loan. So if I had taken a loan and I said every quarter I will make this much payment, and then by year 3, I will have finished paying. So that repayment schedule, you are expected to follow it. If you don't follow it, you're said to have defaulted. So if an obligation falls due in June, and June comes and you did not make that payment, then you have defaulted. So I don't see any big deal about, finishing the payment of a loan. You are supposed to finish the payment in line with the terms and conditions that you signed to when you procured that loan. So for the said IMF loan, I believe that we have a repayment schedule. We have followed through our repayment schedule, making the payment that are due as and when due, and then make the last bit of the payment, and that is all. It is a standard thing in every loan, all and every loan. In fact, if you don't make it, then you have defaulted, and your credit history and your capacity to borrow in the market is impaired. So for me, there is no big deal about fulfilling your obligation under a loan. That is the expectation of every loan procurer, and the expectation also from the person that gave the loan.
Mr. Olojede, let me follow that with another question regarding interests. Mohammed Ibrahim's video there said that this was not just a loan, but it also had some addendums to it when it comes to interests, the international interest in Nigeria. Do you agree that this might be so, or do you have an objection to it?
You see, it is important for us as a country, as a people, to know that those institutions were not set up because of the love for us. It has nothing to do with that. The people that put the money there want to make money. So when they borrow you, when they lend you money, of course you pay interest on the loans. And there are all sorts of loans that they can give you, including some loans that from history, it appears as if it is not their duty anyway to determine what you need and how you want to deploy it. But if somebody says, I'm going to give you a loan, you can take this money onto a chopper, open the doors of the chopper and start to throw it, whoever can catch what amount. That is your own cup of tea if you accept that kind of a loan. As a country, we must determine why we need a particular loan. We must have the discipline to deploy the loan for the purpose for which it has been procured, and we must also measure the impact. If you ask me, loan that was procured for COVID-19, how much have we audited that loan? Was it deployed to what it was supposed to be deployed to? Because across the world, not even just Nigeria, a lot of COVID-related loans was squandered. A lot of it was stolen across, even in countries that are Western.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, I don't know how much of this loan was deployed for the purpose for which it was procured. I don't know whether we have measured the impact of this deployment, or what with the information. The only information I have is that we have repaid.
So we've repaid, but my question was actually geared toward interest in terms of bidding, not interest financially. Do you think that the IMF or any other body that loans Nigeria actually has other interests in Nigeria or in Africa when it loans these monies? Perhaps maybe to...
Strings attached?
Yeah, are there strings attached? Thank you very much, Judith.
Okay, maybe they want to put us in certain recycled debt that we will not be able to get out of. It is possible that they have other interests. It is very, very possible. What is more important, in my opinion, is we, the borrower. Are we sensitive to whatever interest? Are we procuring money for purposes that are useful for us? That is more important than what the third party or what the other party, what may be the intention of the other party. If you didn't go and take the loan, after all, they're not going to force it down your throat. So it is for us, the onus is not on IMF whether they have interest or not. It is for us as the borrower to determine whether we need a particular loan or not, and how we are going to deploy that loan if we procure it.
Thank you.
Right. We know that the spring meetings are over, but of course all the nations will be gearing back to Washington for the end of this year when it comes to IMF. But there's also one of the things I took out from this video by Moussa Ibrahim, who shot that video. And also what you're saying here, Mr. Gbolahan, is the fiscal prudence or the transparency and accountability of these loans that are being taken, right? And so let me come to you, Mr. Bala Ibrahim, right? Critics have argued about, the loans that we take and the transparency and, the fiscal prudence of it. Can you speak to that on behalf of the APC? And also, as we are, reducing our international burden or repaying these loans, domestic loans are also skyrocketing about as well. So let's talk about the transparency of these loans and the fiscal prudence.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. Well, I don't know, is it me or...
Yes, yourself, Mr. Ibrahim. The question was for you, Mr. Ibrahim.
Thank you very much. I may not be able to talk much about the nitty-gritty of the loan and the terms therein, because that is supposed to be for the government. And I'm not here to talk about governance. I'm here to talk about the policies of the party and how far they affect the people that are being governed. So when we look at the reasons for taking loans, there are many, quite many. It can be used for all sorts of reforms, including economic stability, social equity, and the likes. So how far the loan has been used to fulfill some of these things in governance is a factor that can best be looked in from the side of those who are in governance. But as I see things and as the party stands, I believe so far so good. When you look at what has been done in recent years, vis-a-vis the amount of money that has been taken as loan, and even the will to repay that loan is a sign of prudence and strength on the side of government, and this will bolster confidence and make further requests for loans to be obliged because of the willingness of the government to pay back loan. So it means the government is operating under, quote unquote, the umbrella of prudence. And what is being done in the country so far by way of reforms are reflecting those ambitions.
Right. But Mr. Bala Ibrahim, I also do have to ask about, the strings that, Mazino highlighted, and also that video highlighted about the strings attached when it comes to these loans from all these institutions. It's not about interest, but more about their, not interest financially, but interest in terms of their goals with the African nation. Control. Control itself, exploiting whether it's mineral resources or whatever interest that they have in the nation for their benefits. Can you speak to that? And is APC, being the ruling party and the president itself, how are they able to, show more prudence to the people regarding that aspect?
Well, financial institutions are business institutions. They are not charity organizations or organizations that were formed simply to distribute goodies without returns. So whatever they do it with interest. This interest can be financial, it can be political, it can be economic, it can be anything. Now it is for the recipient to look at this interest that is in the terms of the agreement of the loan and see how far this interest conform with its own interest and where they conflict. It is for the recipient to see how, where there is conflict, it can turn it into a situation that will not be injurious to its own interest. As a party, the policies of the party and the government in power is not supposed to be injurious to the interests of the people in the country. And I believe our party is doing everything in that line to ensure that where loans are taken, the interests are looked into and the interests are utilized or are looked into in a way and manner that it does not present problem to the country. So we are very happy with the way things are being done, and I believe the outcome is going to be in such a way that the ends will justify the means.
let's now come back to Mr. Gbolahan. Mr. Gbolahan, I wanted to know whether there are alternatives to borrowing from the IMF. Do you think that there might be need to perhaps have an emergency fund, a continental emergency fund, when it comes to ECOWAS or the African Union? And how would this benefit African countries?
Okay, I didn't hear you clearly. I thought you said something about what are the alternatives to borrowing?
I asked what the alternatives are to borrowing from the IMF. Could we have an ECOWAS or an African Union, an AU emergency type of facility where African countries can go to instead of the IMF, and how this would benefit these African countries?
Well, those institutions actually exist in Africa. You have the AFDB, you have the AFC, you have Afrexim. There are African institutions that are funding African-related loans and needs generally. So that answers that part of the question. However, I believe we need to expand the capacities of those African institutions to do even much more. The thinking is that because they are African institutions, African-focused, the fears that we have about some other institutions that are outside of Africa, that they probably have interest in keeping us in debt and all of that, perpetuating us in poverty, all sort of theories, which are possibilities. I'm not throwing anything out of the box. Those fears will be heavily moderated if we are able to expand the capacities of those African institutions, AFC, AFDB, Afrexim, and others that exist on the soil to provide the needs for financing for African countries. So we can do that. There are alternatives. We just need to expand their capacities.
We just need to expand indeed. Gentlemen, I must say thank you for taking out the time to join us. I wish we could continue, but this is where we draw the curtains, not only for this discussion, but also for the program as well. Mr. Gbolahan Olojede, he is a public affairs and policy analyst, giving us a bit of insight following the repayment of the Covid-19 loans from IMF, and also to Mr. Bala Ibrahim Alhaji. Bala Ibrahim is the National Publicity Director for the APC. Alhaji, I'm still asking for my salad meats, but that'll be another time. Gentlemen, we appreciate you both for coming on. Thank you for doing this with us. Thank you
very much.